The other night, I was just, I just found myself thinking about fundamentalist Christians.
Okay.
And I just started laughing. A deep belly laugh that brought me so much joy. And it wasn't derisive laughter. It was just, it was hilarious to me.
Yeah.
Like, there were two thoughts. One, we've had 2,000 years and this is where we are.
Yeah.
Two, in 2,000 years, none of this matters.
Yeah.
That is the folly of fundamentalist thinking. Look at how much we've evolved just since the Protestant Reformation.
Yeah.
Those Protestants wouldn't agree with what modern day Protestants are doing.
Yeah.
And that was only in the 1400s. So even given another 600 years, we're not going to agree now with what people who are considered Christians and followers of the faith are going to be doing in 600 years. And already you're starting to see a lot of deconstruction happening. You see more fundamentalists ever just because the population is larger than it has ever been.
Yeah.
But you're going to see more and more definitions of what it means to be a Christian arise over the next 600 years.
Yeah.
And like what is acceptable under that umbrella. And probably there'll still be warring ideologies, but there'll be different ideologies, like absolutely, from what they were today.
Yeah.
So when I think about fundamentalism, really of any kind, but particularly religious fundamentalism, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's been a second.
Yeah.
Let a few more seconds go by and then decide what is fundamental to this belief.
Yeah. Well, do you think, like, I've heard that there's been a real serious uptick in atheism, too, that's kind of been, of this current generation, that's been one of the more prevailing mindsets. Do you think that there's been a fundamentalist response to that? Like, if religion is being threatened in that way, just as a premise, it's being threatened almost, that people feel the need to really draw those lines pretty hard now, because you can't just sort of like switch the Christian gear, switch the Catholic gear, whatever it is. You have to kind of almost defend religion as a category as much as you have to defend your religion.
Well, that gets complicated. See, atheism can be a form of fundamentalism.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So a backlash against atheism is necessary when both sides have a fundamentalist response to the other.
Yeah.
So I'm right absolutely versus I'm right absolutely. But then you look at a lot of the newer atheists who are okay with a little bit of mysticism and a little bit of mystery and like, oh, science can't explain this. I'm okay calling that God. Whatever.
Yeah.
I guess it just really depends on what level of acceptance there is between two beliefs. And like, is atheism an ideology?
Yeah, and I guess for this conversation, I'm more referring to the fundamentalist atheists, just because it is a more... that's actually I have kind of an issue with it because it's an ideology, which is just stupid to me. It's like you're just spending all your time talking about how there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
Why?
And just as some atheists do not view it as an ideology, or I shouldn't even say view it, but like do not act as if it is their ideology.
Yeah.
A lot of Christians don't act as if Christianity is their ideology.
Yeah, totally.
So as that gap is bridged a little bit more and people learn to explore in a more mystical way each other's beliefs or each other's ideological tendencies, but not necessarily full beliefs, that narrows the bridge and that allows people to just kind of play around in each other's beliefs without really faith being necessary or without like fundamentalist ideas of you're going to heaven, you're going to hell.
Yeah.
So, okay, the current generation is the least likely generation in history to subscribe to an organized belief system.
Yeah.
So if that continues, then fundamentalism drops.
Mm-hmm.
Because in theory, that also means that the current generation is the least likely to subscribe to fundamentalist atheism.
That's true. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I don't know. I guess we'll just see where it goes. And honestly, it could go anywhere.
It feels like this current situation is a growing thing, because the fundamentalist atheism to me feels like a response. Like it feels like it almost needs that power to like push back. Like it needs a little bit of organization to push back. And I don't know if it's that we've never been able to communicate on this scale, or if there are more people questioning these things than there have been in the past. It could be both too. But it seems like it almost needs a little bit of that unification just to kind of get its legs. But then there's that question of like, what is that it, you know? But we're redefining so many things as a people right now. Like to be honest, I kind of think we're in an enlightenment. As sloppy as this feels day to day, when you look at the values of like the Enlightenment of yore versus like now, it's very similar. You know, science is very critical, and we haven't quite kicked into like the artistic gear yet, but a lot of philosophies are being reconsidered, a lot of religions are being reconsidered, and it just seems necessary right now. But I agree, it was really a time will tell kind of thing, because who knows, man?
And even as I'm saying, there are more and more Christians who are even okay with dropping the label and like see the value in the Gospels, see the value in a lot of the Judeo-Christian teachings, but don't view it in a fundamentalist way. Like that could just be who I read.
Yeah, oh, that's a good point.
I could think that there's more of those people than there really are, because that's who I read and that's who I pay attention to as I'm sort of relearning the lessons of Christianity and relearning how to apply those values in a non-fundamentalist, non-dualistic way. So I'm obviously biased, but like I could be more biased than I think.
Well, I mean, I grew up in a secular scene overall, so this could even be completely off base, but I would love to see just a distinction start to happen between religion and spirituality more, you know, like, because over the years I've kind of just observed a lot of them, at least from afar, and gotten the sense that a lot of people just want that community. They want a place to go and a place to belong and people to talk to, and just a community, like pick you up when you're down, hang out when you're up, whatever. And that's totally cool and valid, and I completely understand that. And then on the other side, people have deep-rooted fears and concerns and need a reason to live and stuff, and spirituality can fill a lot of those holes. But I feel like it doesn't necessarily have to be the same club, you know? Like you can get together in a cool building with a bunch of like-minded or unlike-minded people and talk about mythology, and that could be a fucking awesome night. But you don't have to then pin your afterlife on that. But that's kind of, they've been so big together since God knows when that, like, I don't know how that separation could happen, but I think that could be a really amazing turn for society, to really let people talk about their spirituality together, but not necessarily feel that unification if they don't need it, but also still have access to the community aspects of it because they're completely valuable.
Yeah. I mean, even if there is, okay, have I ever told you about my theory that metaphor is God?
No, I like the sound of that though.
Okay. So a little bit of theology has to lead into this, which is that, like, in the church, we say that God is the Trinity. You know, it is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
So God, the Creator. The Son is Jesus, the Christ. Christ being that which is unitive and that which is the source of all, and Jesus was the embodiment of the concept of Christ.
Okay.
And the Holy Spirit is what follows that, which is that without being fully divine, man feels intrinsically what is unitive and what is the source of all. And so man feels connection to man.
Okay.
This is what allows us to understand and experience metaphor.
Yeah.
This is what allows us to experience art collectively and have a shared experience in something that was created not by God, but by man. So the idea that we can read a metaphor and think to ourselves, oh, yeah, I know exactly what that means, even though that could be based on a specific experience that I have not had. And this is how we read mythology. The specifics of the stories are not something that we have lived, but when then translated into metaphor, we can look at that and say, I know exactly what that means. So I would argue that metaphor is contingent upon the Holy Spirit existing. And because the Holy Spirit is a part of the Trinity that is God as a whole, metaphor is God.
Dude, that's fucking good, man. I like that.
Thank you.
Jesus Christ, I have to mull that one over.
So how this translates into spirituality. The atheist materialists who say there is nothing but that which science can prove would still have to agree that there is something in our brains, perhaps evolutionarily, or perhaps since the point of creation, that relates to one another's human experiences in a way that allows us to observe the world unitively instead of just individualistically or instead of just tribally. And what that is we all share metaphors and we all share emotional reactions to things. And that could be an evolutionary thing, but we all share reactions to things like art, whether that be a line of poetry or a line of melody, like I was saying. So the atheist who is a materialist and says this is all there is and all that is real is what science can observe still cannot discount that.
Yeah.
So to introduce the idea of spirituality being separate from religion is to necessarily make space for that which cannot be practiced or that which is not tangible. And maybe tangible isn't the best word because like what you were just saying about like the community around it.
Yeah.
Right? Like that community is more strongly felt. And felt being the operative word. So it is tangible. It's more strongly felt when people are having shared experiences of knowing or not knowing or just feeling.
Yeah.
So for the materialist, that is all evolutionary traits of the human brain and what it has been conditioned to feel.
Yeah.
But for the mystic, it is, well, this is a product of creation. And therefore... Like, did you start reading that Michael Gungor book yet?
Not yet. It's right there, actually.
Okay.
It's coming right up.
He argues that, like, to be human is to be a creator. You know, no matter what your career, no matter what your belief system, like, to live is to be generative.
Yeah.
So to live is to create experience. To live is to seek out connection with people. To live is to seek fulfillment. So you generate your own experiences.
Yeah.
Within whatever pathway you choose for yourself. To be generative is to be a creator. To be a creator is to bring into form or bring into feeling that which was not there before. And so to generate a sense of community out of a need for community and to be a creator in that sense is to generate a spiritual bond. Now, whether you call it a spiritual bond or just an evolutionary need for tribalism or an evolutionary need to be seen or heard or needed, that is kind of up for debate.
Yeah.
But to view it spiritually is to view it as this has been in the ether since the beginning of time. And this is that thing manifesting over and over again through creation. But to be a materialist is to deny that it has any real relevance other than a neuron firing in the brain for the present moment, based on instincts that were inbuilt thousands of years ago.
Yeah. And I guess my issue with all of those, like, very firm sets of beliefs like that is just that they believe that they've arrived at something. Which I don't know. I have my own theories, my own beliefs about how things could go, but I just don't feel that that's fair, you know, for one person to say, all right, I'm drawing this line. Everybody get behind it. It's just like, based on what, you know? You're a bunch of neurons firing too, or you're a creation of God too, or whatever, you know, it's just, yeah, that's something I've always kind of been puzzled by with where spirituality meets society or meets human beings.
Yeah. Hence the laughter.
Yeah.
Hence my laughter going.
Yeah.
It's not a destination. You're still going. You're still learning.
Yeah.
But I think it's all about challenging each other to learn. And, like we were talking about with Ryan last week, the weeds, pulling the weeds. You might learn that some of those weeds have benefits to you and aren't actually weeds.
Yeah.
And can nourish you in some way. So, like, the way that you've landscaped your garden is not necessarily how it's going to stay.
Yeah, like didn't they say that when the first European settlers came to America, they were under the impression that everything red that was growing was poison?
Really? I've never heard that.
Yeah, at least tomatoes, I believe they thought were a bad scene. And some natives kind of showed them, like, no, you can eat these. Because they believed that it was, God damn, I hope I'm getting the order of these right. But I know that this happened. Like they thought that they resembled a very, very poisonous plant that they had in their own land. And they were gradually introduced to the fact that this is cool.
I'm just picturing someone in Jamestown going, don't eat the tomatoes. Those are a bad scene, man.
Here, have some of this kush, man. No, I always think about that, though, dude. Like, if we had never gotten comfortable with eating shit that's red, how much of life would suck? Like, all of my favorite foods are red, basically, or have red. But if we had arrived at that conclusion and said, no, this is how this literal garden is going to be, we would never have experienced pizza, which is enough for me to denounce any spirituality or anything.
Yeah. Wouldn't have apples.
Yeah. Cranberries.
Cranberries, yeah.
So we basically wouldn't have the Cape.
We wouldn't have Cape Cod.
Strawberries, raspberries,
Mm-hmm.
A lot of red.
Yeah,
red things.
A lot of berries. Berries are the thing I love most in the world.
Yeah. If they weren't there, just blueberries, but not the inside's red.
Kinda, yeah. It's like burgundy, yeah.
Well, I feel like they were more focused on the skin, but
yeah.
That was sure a trend back then. Jesus.
Still is, man.
Yeah. I probably said it before in one of these, but like any philosophy or any practice that sort of accounts for the fallibility of man, that makes sense to me because it's just too big of a component of our nature to pretend for even a second that it's not there. And that's my issue with like when we believe that we have arrived at something and that it is the only way it could possibly be under any circumstances. How could we possibly know that? Even the instrument we're studying it with, even if it's our own brain, it's completely subjective and completely flawed, and we can't measure that last little bit. Because, I mean, think of how real everything to do with matter seemed until you realize that there's antimatter, and some of that stuff that we were assuming about matter, we were just bridging gaps to make it make sense because we couldn't figure out what the hell's going on over here. And now we, 100 years later, start to realize, oh shit, there's an entire universe worth of stuff we did not realize was sitting right among us. It doesn't disprove everything that happened up to that point. It just proves that like we could not say this was the ultimate nature of everything because here's another ultimate nature of everything, you know, like I think that's fucking cool. I love that about spirituality, about science, about just human thought and experience. Like it's just fun as hell and doesn't change anything, except it just colors in your world a little bit more or pulls the curtain apart a little bit more. And I just find it strange that we can't embrace that more as a group.
You know, I was talking to my dad recently about spirituality, and inherent to that conversation when talking to a Christian is the idea of the spirit world, which I hadn't even really thought about for years.
Yeah.
But inherent to this conversation is, okay, here's the spirit world, and here are forces of good and evil that are going to influence you if you open the door to the spirit world. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't thought in those terms in so long. And it made me uncomfortable thinking, like, can I talk about spirituality without this dualistic idea of forces of good and evil, angels and demons, entering into the conversation. Like when I talk about spirituality, what I'm talking about mostly is shared experience and a feeling of oneness with nature and a feeling of ancient knowledge, I suppose, and a feeling of mysticism, a feeling of wondrousness. That's kind of what it's all about for me, and it can be different for different people, for sure. But then for talk of the spirit world, like that's a completely different realm for me.
Yeah.
So for a lot of the people who might oppose the idea of spirituality,
Yeah.
I think that opposition comes from their wanting to put up a gate against those forces of quote unquote evil
Yeah.
that might live within that spirit realm, and thereby have control over what you're letting in. But to do so is to view spirituality dualistically. So to view spirituality dualistically is to view it fundamentalistically, first of all, because it is to say either this is helpful or it's not. Either this is observable or it's not. Either this is, and helpful and observable might be deemed as good.
Yeah.
Observable, but in a paganistic way, might be deemed as bad.
Yeah.
Helpful to science because you can do brain scans while someone has a spiritual or mystical experience.
Yeah.
But it's not helpful to a fundamentalistic viewer of science if you have a spiritual experience, but it cannot be observed,
Yeah.
So the dualistic mind wants to look at things like spirituality or things like the spirit world as I have control over my perception of this because I can label it one thing or another.
Yeah.
And I can impose benevolence onto it, or I can impose maliciousness onto it. And it is under my control because I'm the one who labels it, and I'm the one whose beliefs it is either agreeing with or infringing upon.
I mean, that has me thinking, too, that maybe something like fundamentalism isn't fundamentally wrong. Unless you start to apply it to things that we've extrapolated.
Yeah.
And come to those conclusions about, like you could be fundamentally scientific as long as you apply it to the universal things that aren't necessarily conclusions, things like the scientific method. Like that's a pretty tried and true good way to reason. But what you reason to isn't necessarily right because you did it that way. It just means that you followed all the steps that we've agreed for hundreds of years now avoid the most fuck-ups given our tools that we have at our disposal. And it could be the same thing for something like religion. Like there's aspects of it that work. And then there's aspects where we start piecing together those initial aspects to make secondary things that we assume work because we really want them to work, or because the first thing works, so why the hell wouldn't the second? Or because it hasn't appeared to be broken yet. Like as soon as we start dipping our toes into things like that is where I think something like fundamentalism of any kind becomes wrong, because it's just not, I want to say it's not proven or it's not totally fleshed out, but even that feels fundamentalist. I don't know. It just isn't certain the way the first things are. And if the whole point is certainty, then apply it to the things that are certain.
Yeah. I've been reading The Prophet.
Yeah.
And a great line in that book, I'm going to paraphrase it. When you think that you have found truth, say that you have found a truth.
Yeah.
Not that you have found the truth.
Yeah.
That is non-dualism. So to be a fundamentalist is to claim to have found the truth and then impose that truth onto others instead of letting it be true to you and letting yourself take solace in that particular truth.
Yeah.
The fundamentalist grasps a truth and turns it into the truth.
Yeah.
And then begins to see the world dualistically, because anything that disagrees with that truth is a falsehood. Mm-hmm. The non-dual way of looking at that is, I have found a truth. You have found a truth. It is different from my truth. But because it is a truth relative to your lived and felt experience, it is still valid to you. Mm. And therefore, it should still be valid to me. Because if it is not, then we create conflict.
Yeah. And that's where I think that the separation of some of these roles could come in is I wonder sometimes if just the pressures of living on this earth can put a person, like basically, can we reason with things like this? Can we think this way out of a place of luxury? You know, because we're sitting in first world homes thinking about the meaning of it all. But if the world is coming down on you every second of every day, and you just want a fucking answer, like you just want something to be still and to be okay, I can see how you would arrive at dualism or at fundamentalism or at something that just stops the ball rolling for 20 seconds so you can get your shit together and believe that things will someday be okay, even if you're dead by then. Like, I understand how that pressure could lead to that conclusion, and then that conclusion could be passed down and passed down and passed down, and then, you know, all of a sudden we're so far from that original comfort that we're causing discomfort again. And that's where I feel like if we could properly separate some of these things, where a church, for example, could provide that comfort just as genuinely for the people who need it, but it doesn't carry with it this burden where for that to be valid, it has to be this truth all the time, present, past, and future. If you could separate it from that, so basically take the pressure away, like keep the gas away from the fire, then we're free to reason and explore spiritually and try to figure out what in the hell we're doing and grow, basically. And we're also free to be in pain.
Yeah. And that's where a lot of the claims that religion is born of fear come about. And I guess, you know, go back to the most ancient religions, you know, in Mesopotamian culture, and ziggurats being built to honor the gods of cities that grant certain territories rain and good harvest.
Yeah.
You know, sustenance depended on the graces of the gods. In a sense, you have to make an argument that religion was born of fear. But that criticism of modern Christianity can also be true, but is not necessarily true. And what you were just kind of talking about is the urgency of that fear.
Yeah.
And you don't observe Christian fundamentalism unless you are like positive that you're going to hell if you don't live a certain way.
Yeah.
And unless you're positive that other people are going to hell if they don't believe in your truth. So I have a lot of admiration for the Christians who have taken that fear out of it. And when we talk about fundamentalism, what we're talking about is a proclaimed answer to mystery.
Yeah.
That necessarily requires faith.
Yeah.
We've said before, I don't know if it was on this podcast or not, but just in conversation, we've said before that the opposite of faith is not doubt, it's certainty.
Yeah.
Faith and doubt kind of need to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Certainty is sort of the enemy, because certainty is fundamentalism. So I guess take what I just said out of it. The fundamentalist, whether a Christian or an atheist or of any ideology, is someone who is certain. It is not someone who has faith, because it's not someone who allows doubt.
Yeah.
And to allow doubt is to allow that you're only trying to answer a mystery that is still a mystery.
Yeah.
And that is one of the great metaphors intrinsic to the world, is that we are all burdened by mystery.
Yeah.
And for some of these practices that are not necessarily ideological, but just spiritual practice, it's taking the burden out of the mystery. It's living in harmony with the mystery, but not being certain about what the mystery is.
Yeah.
It's having faith that just because it's mysterious does not mean that it is ominous.
Yeah, that's good.
But also, have your doubts. We're human. We're here. We don't know why. Have your doubts. But certainty about anything is always going to deprive someone else of their freedom to have doubts.
Yeah.
Or their freedom to have the kind of faith that they need to have in whatever moment they're living in.
But then there's that certainty and the doubt and the faith about the future and the afterlife and, you know, things that have yet to happen. But there's also the applications that deal with the past or the deeds that you've done, because that's another, I feel like that's maybe even a stronger thing that binds us to religions in a lot of cases, or even to science, really. Anything that becomes kind of fundamentalist is something that helps us reckon with our actions throughout our lives. Like, take something like euthanasia. It is about as divisive as you can get as far as an action goes, because it is, to a lot of people, 100% merciful and saintly, and on the other side, it's fucking murder of a helpless person. And I don't know, if you do that deed, if you commit that act, you have to live with it for the rest of your life, regardless of whether or not you believe it was right or wrong or whatever. Like, that kind of uncertainty, if you're not prepared to wake up every day and stare it in the eyes and try a little bit more to understand it completely on your own, it'll unravel you, So I can see why somebody would take comfort in, I don't know, say they're scientifically minded and they just believe that this was the right thing to do because, factually speaking, this person was in way more pain than they were enjoying life, and this was the move. Versus somebody who believes that murder is a sin, and if they do that, they're sending themselves to hell. And all. It's like both of those allow you a little bit of respite from the fact that you have no idea if that was right on a certain level, or even if it's not that it was right or wrong, but just that now there's this gap, now there's this pain, because if it was a loved one or if it was somebody that you knew, like, there's just so much uncertainty in there, and it's not always kind of something that's ponderable. Sometimes it's something that just fucks with you forever. And I don't know, I've never been in that position, but I imagine something like a confession or something where you can walk up to somebody whom your faith or in whatever, whether it's science or religion, you've bestowed upon them that utmost authority to just rule on whatever you've done. That comfort must be invaluable.
I think that has to be an extension of the conversation about assisted suicide, or what is now called medical aid in dying.
Yeah.
Because the scenario you're describing is one where the person who is suffering, or the person who doesn't have their powers of speech, does not have a way to enact free will.
Yeah.
But the same kind of fundamentalism that would stop that person from being euthanized is the fundamentalism that would prevent someone from determining when it is their own time to die.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it is of their own accord, even if it is their wish that their suffering be ended, and it can be ended medically and professionally and safely without causing any harm to others and without causing trauma to whoever would find them.
Yeah.
If they were to take their own life. That same fundamentalism is going to say it's not your choice when you die. You are in God's hands.
Yeah.
You can't take your own fate into your own hands. And if you do, then you're condemned to hell for eternity, because assisted suicide is still suicide.
Yeah.
But it's only the fundamentalists that are weighing in trying to stop it.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I don't know that there is a fundamentalism that exists on the other side of the debate. Well, I mean, you could argue that there is. It's like mercy should be shown, or what you just said, like the utilitarian side of it is that more suffering than joy is now present in their life. And so that is mercy.
But it's so subjective too by that point.
Yeah, exactly. It's subjective. And I don't know that there is a fundamentalist point of view about what is mercy and what is not. But there is a fundamentalist point of view about what is murder and what is not.
And that's kind of what I mean, is like that point is always going to be so complex that it's really impossible to rule on it in any sort of objective way that you can like be at peace with in and of itself without some sort of foundation of beliefs, whatever they may be, or philosophies, or, just you have to have reasoned your way or even had those conversations with loved ones or whatever. Just that's kind of the stuff that I think you'd be telling yourself at night. Like I've never done it. I've never been in the position where I'm in the room and I have to pull the plug or something like that. But I was there when my parents were drawing up their wills, and we had this conversation, and we've all talked, like everyone in my house has talked about this stuff on a philosophical level of just like, what do you think's right? What do you think's wrong? This was like kind of just how we'd shoot the shit sometimes. And I really enjoyed those conversations. Like I like kind of working through these things, but it was weird having that talk in a lawyer's office. And they just kind of looked at me and they were like, listen, we want to put you on this thing, but do you think you could do it? And like, do you think if you were actually like confronted by a doctor and they said, so-and-so is in a coma, you got to make a decision right now. Would you actually have the capacity to do it? And it was weird because when the lawyer asked me that, I was like, oh Christ, I don't know. Like how would I possibly know? But I thought about it for a second and I was like, well, no, I mean, I've had these conversations with both of my parents extensively. They know my views on it. I know theirs. We've even gone so far as to discuss, like, if I'm ever in XYZ state, good Christ, I don't want to live anymore, like, under any fucking circumstances. Like, if you ever find me in that state, you pull the plug. Do you understand me? Like, we've had those talks, and I just kind of realized, like, yeah, I know I would know what to do, and I would have the guts to do it, because I think to let them down in that way would be to go back on this foundation of, like, love and respect that we have for one another. But I also told them that I can't promise it wouldn't fuck me up for the rest of my life. Like, I can't promise that I wouldn't think about that every night before I went to bed, and I wouldn't constantly doubt myself from that neurotic, anxious place. And that's kind of the fear, I mean, is like, whether it's right or wrong is almost immaterial. It's just the, like, you have kind of reached beyond your level of understanding because you knew you had to. And then you have to spend the rest of your life wondering about that. And God, it would be nice to have a way out, you know? And I don't know. Like I said, I haven't experienced that end of it, but I have to imagine that if and when I do, there will be a time when I'm like, God damn, I wish somebody could just come down from heaven and say, you did the right thing, and then go back up and I can sleep soundly for the however many years I have after that.
Well, here's where this conversation gets really interesting. My own personal point of view is this. As we were discussing in the episode about the human condition, we all make our own meaning. We define the meaning of life for ourselves, and we tell ourselves the stories that are like we build the constructs that we think we belong in. And that construct for me, in terms of spirituality, is how am I participating in the world? How am I absorbing and consuming and then regenerating substance and discourse, which are then contributed to the constructs that I find fulfillment in, right? So if I were ever in a vegetative state and I could no longer participate or contribute, I don't think that I would want to live anymore.
Yeah.
Now, the one caveat is maybe if I could still enjoy music, maybe if someone could still read to me and I had full comprehension of what they were saying, then I'd be like, okay, I haven't heard every book yet. Let's keep going. Let's keep it going.
Yeah.
However, I have no idea what happens after we die. So I don't know that I would necessarily be thinking, don't kill me yet because this is all there is. I have heard exactly one person say to me that if they were in a vegetative state, keep me alive as long as possible. I have heard exactly one person say that. In order to say that, you have to fully believe that this is all there is. You have to fully be a materialist and believe that once you are dead, your experiences are done. Lights out, nothing after.
Or fully believe that you're going right to hell, too, because you might be wanting a stay of execution, you know?
But the funny thing about that is in itself a fundamentalist belief.
Yeah.
So in order for that to be true, in order for you to want to be kept alive in a vegetative state, you would have to have an ideologically opposing belief to the people who want you to be kept alive in a vegetative state. Assuming that the reason they think it's murder is because they're Christians. But yeah.
Dude, I'm putting you in my will. Just under the condition that you have to keep me alive for the duration of your reasoning to the point of whether or not it's ethical and moral to kill me. And you have to do it out loud.
Oh, I will. I'll record it.
And play it. Yeah, I'll listen to it. Maybe it'll wake me up.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Then it's all moot.
I guess the point that I'm making, though, is that, like, if that question hasn't been answered directly during that person's life, it has to be determined by what their beliefs were, what you know their beliefs to be, right? So, like, if you are fully aware that they are a materialist and they live their life as an atheist and they think that this is all there is, then it's a question of whether they found peace in that and whether they're okay with dying. But I think this is like all the more reason for us to speak openly about personal beliefs, individually held beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to actually say that this is like the most concrete and terrifying example of why we should live in the now and like love one another and know one another while we're here.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you're right. I mean, that is the only basis we'll have.
Yeah. Because if somebody is like in the vegetative state and I have to believe that they're suffering more than they're ever experiencing joy.
Yeah.
But I have heard them say, I believe assisted suicide is murder. I'm not going to make that call for them. I'm going to want to honor their beliefs. I'm going to disagree with that. I'm going to disagree with that belief.
Yeah.
But that's my personally held belief.
Yeah.
But you have to honor somebody's truth, even if it's not your truth.